Late one night in 1964, a West Virginia reporter almost collided with what looked like a giant albino deer. But what he saw was far stranger and more terrifying. This encounter wasn't just a wildlife sighting. It unlocked a chilling secret hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains. What really prowls those dark, winding roads? Let's start. On the evening of June 16, 1964, Robert Cockrell, a 32-year-old reporter, wrapped up his shift at a small West Virginia newspaper and made his way back to his car. It had been an ordinary Tuesday at the office. He had prepared a piece about the upcoming 4th of July parade, reviewed some local announcements, and was now ready to head home. Robert had deep roots in the area and had been with the Sentinel for nearly a decade. Truthfully, the town was quieter these days. Once a thriving railroad center in the early 1900s, by the 1960s, it had settled into a peaceful rhythm where the most notable stories involved high school football games or church events. With little on his mind, he got into his car, started the engine, and began his usual drive home. His route followed the western bank of the Tygart River. The road was dimly lit, with only his headlights cutting through the darkness. Occasionally, moonlight would shimmer on the water's surface. Robert was lost in thought, tired and eager to reach home and rest. If you were driving home late on a quiet night like Robert's, how would you react to an unexpected and unexplainable encounter? Comment and chat with me. The whistling on Route 119. As Robert drove along, about halfway to home, he noticed a delicate, high-pitched whistling sound, similar to when a breeze slips through a small opening in a window, though his windows were up tight. Wondering if his car might be having a minor issue, he eased his speed, yet the sound seemed to come from outside, near the riverbank. Rounding a bend, his headlights revealed something that made him gently apply the brakes. About 50 yards ahead stood a majestic white deer. Robert had seen many deer before, but never one with such a striking pale coat. More than that, this was the largest creature of its kind he had ever encountered, probably at least 6 feet tall at the shoulder. Seated in his car, Robert quietly observed the magnificent animal as it calmly crossed both lanes and vanished into the forest beyond. His initial feeling wasn't worry or confusion. It was a spark of excitement. As a reporter, he recognized this as a remarkable story. A deer like this would inspire curiosity far and wide, and some enthusiasts might even pay generously to learn where it roams. So Robert made a careful note of his location before continuing on his way home. If you want to see the horrors of Chernobyl caught on camera, I've also added a direct link to the video in the comments section pinned below this video. And don't forget to come back. The next discovery will be about what lurks in the shadows of Highway 119 that soon plunged him and his friends into a night they will never forget. When he gets home, instead of going straight to bed, Robert can't stop thinking about the unusual sighting. The more he reflects, the more he senses something felt unusual about the encounter. Even though it's past midnight, Robert calls his two friends, Jerry Morris and Jim Mouser. He says, "I know this sounds strange, but I saw something on Route 119. I want you guys to come with me to check it out." The serious tone in his voice convinces Jerry and Jim to come over. When they arrive, Robert is pacing in his living room, smoking nervously. He tells them about the large pale deer he saw. Then he adds, "But there's something about it I can't quite explain." Though unsure what exactly, Jerry and Jim notice Robert seems unsettled and agree to go back with him. They figure the best case is seeing a rare animal. The worst is to reassure their friend. All three get into Robert's car and drive to Route 119. Robert grips the steering wheel tightly the entire way. When they reach the spot, Robert parks but keeps the engine running. He sits silently for a moment, then says, "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." Jerry encourages him, "We're all here now, let's see for ourselves." They get out with one flashlight between them. Robert points to where the deer crossed. Sure enough, the grass along the road shoulder is flattened, as if something heavy had passed there. Jim jokes, but no one laughs. As they inspect the area, they hear the whistling sound Robert mentioned earlier, louder this time and coming from the woods about 30 yards away. Then branches snap, not like small twigs, but heavier cracks, as if something large is moving through the trees toward them. The sounds get closer. Robert tenses, grabs Jerry's arm and says, "We should head back now." Suddenly the noises stop. The silence feels even more unsettling, as if something just beyond the flashlight's glow is watching them. Then the whistling starts again, this time from the other side of the road, and it's somehow circled quietly around them. Without saying a word, they all run back to the car. Jerry fumbles with the door handle, Jim glances nervously back with the light, and Robert's hands shake as he struggles to start the engine. They speed away so fast that Robert nearly loses control. On the drive back, no one speaks. Tap the like button to let us know this content is making a difference. And if you're watching on your phone, be sure to press the hype button right below. Every hype helps this video get published to more people, and it truly supports me in earning extra income. I promise to keep bringing you even more great content. The very next morning, Robert wrote a straightforward article about spotting what might be the largest albino deer ever seen in West Virginia. He suggested the whistling sound could have been an unusual mating call, and left out the parts that had unsettled him and his friends that night. What Robert didn't include was that he, Jerry, and Jim had spent the rest of the night in Robert's kitchen, trying to rationalize their experience and calm their nerves. When Robert's article appeared in the paper that Thursday, something unexpected happened. The newspaper began receiving numerous phone calls. The first came from a local woman named Margaret Benson, living about 3 miles from Robert's sighting. She reported that on June 14th, 2 nights before Robert's encounter, she had noticed a large white deer moving slowly through her backyard while she was closing the curtains. Margaret told the paper that she had called her husband to look, but by the time he arrived, the deer had disappeared. The only unusual thing she noted was that their German Shepherd, normally alert and vocal around deer, had been quiet and appeared uneasy, hiding under the bed. Next, 2 teenagers, Bobby Garrett and Tom Hutchinson, shared their experience of seeing the same white deer near the river 5 days earlier while fishing at dusk. Bobby said the deer entered the water, which was odd because the river is quite deep in that area, and deer usually avoid deep water. Tom added that the deer's movement looked unusual. It seemed to take long, deliberate strides, as if stepping over unseen obstacles. Within 3 days of the article's publication, the newspaper received over 20 reports of sightings. Interestingly, some weren't recent. People shared stories from weeks or months earlier that they hadn't mentioned before, fearing disbelief. A farmer named Ed Cutler reported that in April, he had discovered large tracks near his chicken coop after losing 3 chickens overnight. He described the tracks as similar to those of deer, but much larger and spaced far apart, suggesting that something with long legs had passed through. Then came the incident involving Woody Williams and his father on July 18th, about a month after Robert's initial sighting. Woody and his dad, Carl, had spent the afternoon cutting firewood on their property near a dense stretch of forest close to the river. As they loaded the last pieces of wood into their pickup truck, their normally calm bloodhound, Duke, became unusually agitated. Duke was barking and nervously retreating, pressing close to Woody's legs as if uneasy. Carl, an experienced woodsman with 40 years of hunting in these forests, later told authorities he had never heard his dog behave like that. He asked Woody to retrieve the shotgun from the truck, not to use it, but just to be prepared, because when animals act strangely, it often signals something unusual. Carl took the shotgun, loaded it carefully, and kept it pointed at the ground. They stood quietly, watching the tree line and listening. They heard slow, heavy footsteps about 50 yards away, moving deliberately. Carl explained it sounded like a large deer moving through thick brush, which can sometimes create heavy noises. The sounds stopped near the edge of the forest where the trees grew thickest. For about 30 seconds, all was still. Duke continued to growl softly, as if cautious not to draw attention. Then, a massive white deer emerged from the trees. Carl, who had hunted elk in Montana and seen moose in Canada, said it was the largest deer he'd ever encountered in West Virginia, estimating it to be at least 7 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing close to 1,000 pounds. There was one detail Carl couldn't explain. With shotgun raised, he said that for a moment fear almost made him pull the trigger, but then the deer simply turned and walked back into the forest, showing no interest in the men. Woody and his father remained still for another 10 minutes, listening while the dog stayed close. Finally, Carl said, "Let's head back." They gathered their tools and drove directly to the police station to report what they had seen. When they described the white deer to the police, the officer taking the report treated it seriously. By mid-July 1964, there had been so many reported sightings of the albino deer that it had become a well-known phenomenon in the area. The state wildlife department even sent a game warden to look into the reports. By late August, the sightings had drawn attention from outside the local community. Hunters from nearby states came hoping to capture a photo or maybe even find what could be a record-setting deer. The local police began asking people to avoid certain areas because so many were wandering through the woods with firearms. On August 27th, there was an unfortunate mix-up where two different hunting parties accidentally fired near each other in low light, each mistaking the other group for the albino deer. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but after that, the police introduced a ban on night hunting in the area. Groups of high school students started organizing deer watches. They would pile into cars and search at night, turning it into a kind of rite of passage. Spotting the white deer became a way to join an exclusive club. Most of these outings didn't yield much. Kids reported seeing something white in the distance, or hearing the whistling sound, but never getting close enough to confirm. By fall 1964, the reports began to decrease. Occasional sightings still came in, but less frequently than over the summer. People speculated the deer had moved to other areas for winter, or as wildlife officials suggested, it may have passed away. Albino animals rarely survive long in the wild due to the lack of natural camouflage. This story might have faded into local legend, if not for what happened 20 years later. In the summer of 1984, a group of friends from Ohio decided to go camping along the Tygart River. They'd heard about the area being good for fishing. One of them, a 28-year-old electrician named Jeff, was really into bass fishing. They had no idea about the local history with the albino deer sightings from 20 years earlier. On their second night of camping, which was about July 14th, Jeff decided to do some night fishing while his buddies stayed back at camp drinking beer around the fire. He took a small aluminum boat that they'd rented and rowed out to a spot about 100 yards from the shore where the water was deeper. Jeff had been out there for about an hour just enjoying the quiet. It was a clear night, it was beautiful, and there was nearly a full moon. He could see pretty well even without his flashlight. He'd already caught 2 bass and was thinking about heading back when something bumped the bottom of his boat. Jeff later told investigators that his first thought was that he'd hit a submerged log. The river had all kinds of debris in it, but then it happened again. Except this time, whatever hit his boat hit it from below, hard enough that it actually lifted the front of the boat slightly out of the water. Jeff grabbed the sides of the boat to steady himself and looked over the edge into the water. The moon was bright enough that he could see maybe 3 or 4 feet down, but he didn't really see anything. The water was kind of murky from runoff, and whatever had hit his boat was deeper than he could see. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. He was just sitting there holding on to the sides of his boat, waiting to see if it would happen again. About 10 yards away from his boat, the water started churning. Jeff described it like when you see a school of fish getting attacked by a predator. Except there was no school of fish. Something large and white was just below the surface, thrashing around violently. The water was splashing up 3 or 4 feet into the air. He grabbed his oars and started rowing toward shore as fast as he could. But the thrashing was creating these huge waves and rocking the small boat back and forth. Then this is the part that Jeff had trouble explaining to people later on. Whatever was in the water started moving toward him, and he could see this white shape that was just under the surface, maybe 2 feet down, but it was massive. Jeff said it looked like the back of something, like when you see a whale's back break the surface. Except this was in a freshwater river in West Virginia. The wake from this thing was pushing his boat sideways, and Jeff was rowing as hard as he could but making almost no progress. Then the thrashing stopped. The water went calm, and for maybe 5 seconds Jeff sat there in his boat, breathing hard, looking around. Bam! Something slammed into the bottom of his boat so hard that it upset the boat, throwing him into the cold water. Jeff flew into the air, plunging into the cold water. It nearly took his breath away. Even though it was in the middle of July, it was freezing. The second thing he remembered was that something brushed against his leg, not really aggressively, but just brushed past him, and it felt smooth, like touching wet rubber. Jeff started swimming toward the shore faster than he'd ever swum in his life. Behind him he could hear splashing like something was surfacing and diving repeatedly. He didn't look back, he just swam. His friends heard him screaming when he was about 20 yards from the shore, so they came running down and waded in to help pull him out. Of course, Jeff was very scared. He's hyperventilating, pointing at the water, trying to explain what had happened. But his friends looked out at the river, which was now completely calm, and Jeff's aluminum boat was gone. He was very frightened, drenched, shivering, and could barely speak. But when the police arrived, and they had a chance to talk to him and calm him down, he actually gave a very detailed and specific account that, as it turns out, matched the decades-old descriptions of the same animal people reported seeing nearly 20 years before. Now I need you all to understand that this wasn't simply teenagers getting drunk and causing a ruckus and slipping in the water. This was such a big deal that it actually reignited interest in the events that had transpired nearly 20 years before in 19... After Jeff's encounter made the local news, it caught the attention of a ufologist by the name of Gray Barker. He became convinced that whatever people were seeing in the Tigard River area was not a deer at all, but something possibly extraterrestrial. Barker started interviewing witnesses from both nights. He pointed out something that police had been trying to ignore. The whistling sound that multiple witnesses reported was not a sound any known animal could make. In fact, he suggested it might be some kind of communication device or even the sound of a spacecraft. Of course, police pushed back hard against this. The mayor of the town was quoted in the newspaper as saying that all this talk of monsters and UFOs was just bad for business. The police chief suggested that people in 1964 had probably just seen somebody moving equipment on a handcart at night. From a distance, it could look like what people had described. Others claimed that there was no such thing as a large albino deer, that this was all an escaped polar bear from a traveling circus. Though no circus ever reported missing a bear, and nobody could ever explain how a polar bear would survive for 20 years in West Virginia. This is a topic with many differing opinions, but sometimes the attempts to rationalize things just don't fully explain all the details. Unfortunately, nobody had answers. There was no physical evidence other than eyewitness testimony, and the descriptions were just too fantastical to realistically accept. I mean, where were the footprints, the photographs, fur, poor quality photos, anything? Regardless of all of it, eyewitness testimony continued to spread, and it gained so much popularity at the time that it made its way into the national newspapers. And so, at this point, you might be wondering, what on earth were all of these people seeing? What Robert Cockrell saw that night in June of 1964, and all the other eyewitnesses, was not this large albino buck like I've led you all to believe. In fact, it was far more terrifying. What they saw was a figure that stood anywhere between 7 to 9 feet tall, with extremely broad shoulders, potentially 5 feet wide, moving with a very awkward and lumbering gait. Although some might think it was Bigfoot, that's not the case, because many other strange details didn't really fit that Bigfoot mold. It didn't seem to have a head, or at least not one that could be seen. It was just these massive shoulders on top of a large pale body. Equally strange was the fact that it didn't appear to have fur, but this pale seal-like skin, or I guess the closest resemblance would be like the fur on a baby seal. In fact, it was commonly described like this: a gigantic white rectangle, with arms moving across the highway on 2 legs. The entire time, it somehow continued to make that whistling noise, but Robert was never able to physically see how the noise was made, because it didn't really have much of a face. It was evident that whatever this was, it was unusual and not easily explained. Today, this beast is most famously known by something you've probably all heard. It is the Grafton monster. As for the town of Grafton, it embraced the local cryptid stories as part of its cultural appeal, and is now one of the many towns across America that attract visitors interested in mysterious creatures. People still come to town to see where the sightings took place. And just like Point Pleasant and the Mothman, there is a lot of interest, but sightings are of course far and few between. Robert Cockrell, who worked for the official newspaper in Grafton at the time, the Grafton Sentinel, never once changed his story about what he saw that night in June of 1964, and until his death, swore that he had encountered something truly unexplainable on Riverside Drive. Unfortunately, whatever the Grafton monster is, or if it even truly exists, will remain a mystery. And if you enjoy storytelling like this, where we delve into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this from yours truly. And never forget, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.